we're live, and I'll probably grab these are a couple of books. This is a good book, a little bit left wing at times, but it's a good book. And right, so this episode is not the way back. It's Spacefall, and now, as people will know, it says reviews spoil. So I'll just give a summary of the episode for people, and here we go. Here we go. I'll read it out from this book, the program guide written by Tony Atwood. Blake and others are on the spaceship London en route for Cygnus Alpha, which is a prison planet. Blake organises a rebellion with the help of some of his fellow convicts. Avon breaks through to the computer room and temporarily puts the computer out of action, whilst Blake and the others break free from their quarters. However, due to Villa's inability to follow Gan's straightforward orders, the rebellion is quashed. Blake, Jenna and Avon barricade themselves temporarily in the computer room, but finally give themselves up when Sub-Commander Riker, one of the ship's officers, starts killing other prisoners. Meanwhile, the ship London has been buffeted by very severe shockwaves from what is presumed to be a space battle between two alien fleets. Eventually, one of the ships from the battle drifts unpowered and unmanned alongside the London, and Leyland, the London's commander, sends 3 of his crew across to investigate. 2 of these die and 1 goes mad. Riker then persuades his captain to send Blake, Avon, and Jenna across.
It was Raker, wasn't it? Not Riker.
You're probably right, Raker. Yeah.
You say Riker was Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Is that? I'm trying to work out whether this bookmark was in this book.
So I didn't
or
mean
not,
to
or
interrupt you. I just, I was like,
Yeah, that's okay. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Where did this bookmark come from? Did this come from that book? Was it in a different book? It might have been this one. Oh, it's already got 2 bookmarks. Or maybe it came from this one. Maybe.
He's off track. Oh wait, we haven't got to that homicide episode yet. Although you've seen that scene, but we're not there, not to that episode yet.
Right. Okay. There we go. We're in Spacefall. Right, Riker, the nice chap, then suggests a little bit of a dark scene when he says, Riker, we have a woman prisoner on board. Be discreet, something like that.
Yeah. I wasn't sure at first when he said that whether the captain was like, the rock bands where they have the guy designated to pick the chicks out of the crowd to come under the stage. It wasn't like he was saying, be discreet, but bring her to me, or what exactly he was saying.
Yeah, and actually, I'll just go through the rest, then we can we can mention that as we go through it. If we try and do it in chronological order, then we'll be a better structure for people. Okay, Riker then persuades his captain to send Blake, Avon, and Jenna across to the alien spaceship. They experience the Liberator's defense mechanism, which implants in their minds images from their past in order to disorientate and kill them. Blake, however, is able to resist, possibly through his recollection of having been interfered with mentally by the Federation. He destroys the defense mechanism, and the 3 close the outer hatch, thus stopping everyone else from boarding the ship and killing Riker. Jenna then manages to get the Liberator underway. Oh, yes. Yeah, because she's a good part. The reason why she is able to get underway an alien spacecraft, folks, is that the alien spacecraft learns their language and is able to communicate with them. And that's why it probes their minds. So, Jeff, take it away. What do you think?
Okay, so there was a TV commercial, a car commercial, probably early 90s, somewhere around there, whatever. And it has this guy describing this dream that he had. And there's a point where he says, after there's been a bunch of slightly odd things take place in the dream, he says, "Okay, now here's where it gets weird." That's kind of what I felt like with this episode, because it's like 80% or more kind of space action in terms of the episode, because most of what is going on is the revolt. And a few things about that. One, I was thinking, they should have sprung for the extra couple of whatever their the credits, it took to have audio surveillance instead of just video, because then they could hear the prisoners very, very loudly discussing their plans to escape. The fact that they only have one guard in the whole, like, actual room containing the prisoners, that's another not a wise choice by the administration. They have more people in the other room than they have guarding the prisoners. And then that in itself, I think it seemed like Blake really only discussed the escape plans with a few people, yet everybody seemed like they were right away on board, and that seemed a little unrealistic. There's always at least a couple people that are of that mind of, no, it's not worth it, I'm not doing it, and everybody was like, just, oh, they're just all going to fall in line. And it almost made me think, does Blake have like an alternative mind control thing like they use on him? Like he's got some power over the people, because, it wouldn't be too far fetched from what they've set up so far that he, even in the scene at the end where he says, for some reason I knew like this was a dream when the other two of you didn't, I was kind of like, it kind of sets up that sort of idea that, is he got some kind of power, mentally over people and stuff, So there's a little bit elements like that, but as far as like the brute force stuff, there were certain things that I started thinking, like, were the moment where a character's going to die, like the time that the other guy volunteers to be the one who goes in. Like, wait a minute, this is like Star Trek where they send that crew member who's not part of the regular cast down in the away team. Like, I wonder who's not going to make it back. And so I knew he was a goner, and then I started thinking, as soon as the captain told Raker that everything's going to be in the report, that he was like signing his death warrant, because Raker's like, oh, as soon as I have a chance to take him out, I'm gonna do that. So that whole like expedition to the other ship, at first I was thinking, this is Raker's way of trying to get rid of the captain, and I wasn't sure exactly how he was going to do it, but obviously that one was a little bit, the first thing I said happened, but then the second one obviously didn't happen that way. They kind of turned it on its head. So that was good, actually. That there might have been one predictable thing like that, but that the other one wasn't quite as predictable in terms of how it turned out. So that was good. Pretty obvious fake slap. Not sure how many times they rehearsed that when Raker did his backhand that came maybe within 2 feet of her face. So yeah, they hadn't quite perfected their fake combat skills at that point, but
Blake 7 fighting. It's almost as bad. But this thing is, though, contemporaneously, the fighting was not great in Buck Rogers either. Made in the same era. And then by the 1990s, everyone was a martial artist, and it was like,
I mean, in the 70s, you had martial arts movies where they would actually hit each other, but they of course had the exaggerated sound effects, so you'd hear the sound that no actual human contact ever makes, sounding like somebody getting like shot out of a cannon when somebody gets hit across the chest or whatever. that was, some funny stuff. But no, nothing quite that outrageous in the Blake 7 episode. But I think, and I don't know whether this is because of watching Doctor Who, the classic series being about half the length for most of it. I realized there was a short period where they went to 45-minute episodes. For the most part, they were in
Yeah.
the like 25 to 30-minute range. And that's the thing. The thing I find myself with like 7 is I feel myself thinking they should have chopped the episode, and not quite as long, because it's like I think it would be a little bit more effective if and I don't mean necessarily cut stuff out of the episode. I just mean divide it into 2 episodes, each one, so that it's shorter, because I think it would pack a little bit more of a punch. You give you an opportunity for kind of more cliffhangers or whatever, and instead it seems like so far the 2 episodes there's a section that gets a little bit bogged down and feels like it's kind of dragging a little bit.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, both of them are still introductory, and even like the third one is still introductory, and then it starts getting into like where you got focused episodes.
and actually I give them credit for that, because one thing, and this is another Doctor Who reference, which I'll probably make plenty of, because of like we said, the creative people involved. I guess I said that before we started the recording, that every single one of the main creative people, as I watch the credits, are all people who also worked on Doctor Who. Besides, obviously, Terry Nation, you have Chris Boucher, the story editor. You had the producer, David Maloney, and the director of this episode, anyway, was Pennant Roberts. So all of them worked on Doctor Who, so I recognize all of them. Dudley Simpson, also the music. And by the way, the theme music sounds really familiar. Like, it sounds like something else. Like, I can't think of what, but it reminds me of something. So maybe that'll come to me at some point. But speaking of Doctor Who, what was I going to say about that? Oh, Terry Nation, in the stories he wrote for Doctor Who, does an excellent job of building up suspense at the beginning of his stories. He doesn't do the everything's coming at you in the first 10 minutes thing. And that style of hitting you with everything right at the beginning can be effective sometimes, but Terry Nation demonstrates himself to be very good at kind of a slow build. And so you see in this series that I give them credit for not thinking, okay, we've got to set up everything about what's going to be the permanent setting in the first episode. They didn't do that. They said, you know what, it's going to take a few episodes for us to set this up. And I think that's a good choice to not, try to set up everything and have everybody, all set in place by the end of episode 1. Because there's a lot of series that do that. It's like basically by the end of the first episode, everybody's kind of, this is our permanent setting, and everybody's in their roles, and then we go from here. And that's why there's a lot of shows where the second episode seems like kind of a letdown, because the first episode kind of sets everything up, and then from there it sort of falls into the formula. So what's good about Blake 7 is that after 2 episodes, I don't know, I can make guesses, but I don't know exactly where they're going and what's going to be the ultimate, destination, who's going to for sure going to make it where, so there's that suspense is, I think, what Terry Nation obviously has proved himself good at doing. And even in some of his more maligned stories, he still did a good job of that part of it. Even if sometimes there wasn't a very satisfying payoff, the setup was always good. Like in the original Dalek story, the ending is a little bit, it kind of peters out a little bit, but he did a fantastic job in the first 4 episodes of a 7-episode story, setting everything up to that point. Like the pacing is just really great, especially in the first episode. I mean, that to me is one of the, top 10, possibly top 5 single episodes of Doctor Who ever. The Dead Planet. It's just like the pacing is perfect from the very beginning, where they set up everything so they're getting more and more desperate towards the end of the episode, and the radiation is affecting them, and all this stuff leads to the powerful conclusion of the first sight of some stagehand waving a plunger at Barbara. I mean the first epic reveal of a Dalek. Um, but that ending wouldn't be so effective if it hadn't been the slow build to that point, and that's what I think is so good about that. So I wasn't quite as riveted the way I was to that to Blake 7, but I still think that part of it is good in terms of the longer you can keep the audience kind of guessing where is this going, the better, as long as it doesn't just become one big runaround where nothing ever ends up happening, because then it's unsatisfying. But if it's if it does actually lead somewhere, it just takes a while to get there. That's a good thing. So,
yeah, I mean, you still got a next few episodes where you're introducing other characters that become part of the overall mix.
Right.
And shape of the program, such as there's a couple of people there from on the Federation side that you've not seen yet.
Oh, well, don't tell me too much.
Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Well, because I find myself, of course, even still like the title. We know that there's going to be 7, but 7 what? 7 who? Who are the 7? Because so far, like the end of this episode, you're thinking, oh, well, there's only 3 of them, or 2, depending on how you look at it. But then, how many of the others are going to be in the 7 or what? So there's still a mystery there.
Now, when that bit about and now it gets weird. What was the weird bit for you?
Oh, the scene in the other ship where they start having the memory attack or whatever it's supposed to be, because it was weird. It's got this thing, looks sort of like a pulsing cocoon or something that's transmitting these bizarre mind things. Of course, I had to laugh at Morgan walked in the room right there, and so we both laughed at that's like 2 of them have these horrifying images of somebody being attacked or captured or screaming or whatever, and then Avon has someone calmly talking to him. It's like, oh, yeah, that's terrifying.
When it is for an INTJ.
I'm like, who was this guy? What did he do? Because you can't hear what he's saying, so it's just like some dude speaking. Oh man, that's rough.
Well, so on a scale of 1 to 10, because now we can talk about Avon. On a scale of 1 to 10, how INTJ is Avon?
I don't know, because he's only been in 1 episode that I've seen so far. So,
based on this episode.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think this episode itself would lock him into being necessarily INTJ. He could be an ISTJ, or even some other types. All it really establishes, I mean, if you want to go with stereotypes, obviously INTJs tend to be known as being good with computers, but they're obviously not the only ones. And they establish him as being like this computer expert guy.
Yeah. So in terms of the stereotype things of INTJ, so in other words, on a scale of 1 to 10 of the INTJ stereotype, where is?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe a 7. I don't know. He talks about there was some line where he implies that having to spend time around people is bad, but other than that, it's like he seems more cynical. He's confident in his abilities, but he's not necessarily super arrogant. He's just, I mean, in this episode anyway, he just establishes himself as being very sure of himself in certain areas. But he's also flexible enough that it doesn't take much convincing from Blake for him to get on board with the dangerous escape plan. So evidently at that point, if he is high on the INTJ stereotype scale, then he did a very quick cost-benefit analysis to determine that it was worth a try.
I like the part of it where
there's examples to the extreme of that. In Doctor Who, in the very first episode that the Master is in, or not necessarily first episode, but first story, Terror of the Autons. When the Master has this plan worked out with the Nestine
consciousness
about taking over the Earth, and then the Doctor's like says one line to him and he changes his mind. It's like, really? This guy's supposed to be this brilliant like criminal mastermind guy, and it just didn't occur to him until the Doctor tells him that, well, you know, they're not going to spare you. They're not going to differentiate between you and anybody else once they've achieved what they want. And yeah, that just slipped his mind somehow. So obviously there's extremes of that. And you know, Avon's not quite. It's not quite the same situation there because he hadn't devised necessarily a master plan that he completely comes off of. So anyway, yeah.
There was a nice bit in the plot where they actually discussed where Avon might have thought about, you know, that thing about changing the ship's log and like killing some people off.
Mm-hmm.
Where the others were discussing, I wonder if they have approached Avon with that idea.
Mm-hmm.
So and changing the log, and then they were saying that he had actually thought about it and actually run the calculations of doing that.
Yeah, well, that's what
I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah, I thought that was quite interesting.
So he tries to kind of stay a step ahead of him. And I think maybe that's what convinces Avon quickly, because he looks at Blake as being, if not necessarily an equal, at least in his league in terms of intelligence or you know, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
whatever he uses to measure worthiness.
Yeah, in the Federation they have 4 different levels of grades for their workers, and both Avon and Blake are alphas.
Okay.
In terms of because there's a little bit of a communist system in the Federation, so they've got 4 levels of, so in terms of mentally they're both alphas. They're both alpha grades. Blake, what type do you think Blake is?
I don't have enough information to make a guess at this point.
Right.
Because they kind of have a crisis moment for him in this episode, because it shows that you know, he's not just out for himself or even his own family. Like, he considers the lives of the other people involved. So, and that of course doesn't necessarily indicate a type, because, you know, any type can do that. But I think it seemed like more of they kind of was not stereotyping, but kind of putting him in the role of being a thinking type. But then it was like certain things he does sort of he confronts more of an emotional decision. So
and we can say for the audience that was the point where Raker started killing prisoners. Right. And Blake decided to give in.
So I don't know. I'm sort of leaning toward him being a perceiver, because it seems like even though he does think ahead, he definitely doesn't seem like he's thinking very far ahead. It's more of a what do we need to do to survive to the next part of something to do, as opposed to it doesn't seem to have the TJ element of okay, we have to line up the whole plan and ahead of time and have all the steps and the contingencies planned out. He seems to be a little bit more willing to kind of say, okay, here's what we need to do to get us to a point, but then after that we'll figure something out. Which is why he was blindsided by Raker doing the executions of people. He wasn't expecting that to happen, obviously. He hadn't thought about it.
I won't say what type I think he is, because he might prejudice things.
Yeah.
In terms of
which I realize I sort of already did with the homicide characters. I pretty much told you most of what I thought their types were, but
yeah.
But not everybody, and there's still some characters to come and all that too. So, and you may end up disagreeing with me on some, and that's fine. I have a stronger, not attachment's not the right word, but a stronger, confidence in some of the characters types than others.
Oh yeah, I mean like G being the STJ and
that
Pendleton definitely being an artisan, and then Munch being an ENTP, partly because of the guy who's playing him is probably an ENTP.
Yeah, right. There's some on that I'm pretty solid on what I think, and then there's others that I would be willing to entertain. That well, again, it's a character you haven't encountered yet, but there's a character named Russert that Morgan brought up while we were doing the video the other day. He said that she acted kind of NF, so he kind of, and I'm not sure about that. I could be convinced either way on that one. But anyway.
There's a character called Gan. What was mentioned? The big guy.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say he's sort of the muscle.
Yeah. Did they mention anything about what did they mention about Gan?
I don't remember anything. He just seemed to come out of nowhere.
Right.
I mean, and I don't know if it was because I wasn't paying attention enough,
right,
or whether they really didn't say anything about him. But yeah, some of the characters in this episode just sort of sprung up, and they sort of acted like we were supposed to know who they were, but they didn't.
Right. So they didn't actually say anything about him.
Not that I remember. If they did. I wasn't.
Right. You'll find out more about him in the next episode.
I don't even remember the name of the squirrely guy. So.
Squirrely.
The one that dropped his gun when the big guy told the Federation dudes.
Well, that guy's Villa Restal, and he was actually in an episode of Doctor Who. I think he was in Sunmakers, maybe.
Yeah, that's
Michael Keaton.
I like Terry Nation, but he's not necessarily. If he was the one that came up with the names, he's not necessarily great at naming people.
No.
That guy does not look like a Villa. That does not fit him at all. I'm gonna call him Squirrely. How about that? Because that's
you
what I
call
think
him
every time I see him.
Restal. Villa Restal.
That doesn't fit him either. He doesn't look like a Restal. Of course, Restal sounds like a rest stop, which you could do at a villa. So it sounds like some kind of vacation spot. It's the Villa Restal. Come.
So what do you think? What do you think of him, though?
Well, in the first episode, they kind of made him seem a little bit more of kind of a, just sort of a general opportunist, kind of a guy who's cynical, but just sort of looking, get his, so to speak. In the second episode, they made him more of a doofus. He doesn't seem like he really adds anything to the team, so to speak. You know,
Did he open anything?
did he open anything?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
like a door, a locked door. Did he do anything like that?
Um, I don't remember him doing that. I remember him asking about the door.
Yeah.
But the main door openings I remember were done by the computer guy, and then when the big guy got the guard to open the door with the handprint or whatever.
Yeah. You see, Villa hates the fact that he's indispensable. So he is useful, and you'll find out what his gift is probably in the next
Well,
episode.
he said in this episode that he had a fear of closed spaces or whatever, and he says like something about I don't know what that's called or something, and the girl goes cowardice. So she's obviously not too impressed with him.
Oh yes, that's Jenna.
Yeah.
That's Sally Nivette, who was in a Doctor Who story, one of the few good ones to have actually been made this century, but on audio, Spare Parts.
Oh, okay.
She played Doctor. I think it was Doctor Kellerman.
Well, I think there were quite a few good audio stories that have been made this century.
Oh, well, I've not heard them yet. I can only judge what I've heard.
Yeah, I heard quite a few, more in the Fifth Doctor than any other because I basically listened to essentially 2 seasons worth of Fifth Doctor audio stories. So
Yep.
because they were, I listened to the ones that were supposed to take place between Time Flight and the Arc of Infinity. So
Right.
they're the Doctor and Nyssa
Right.
traveling together, and then I heard the ones later on
Right. Yeah.
after he got Perry on board.
But I think that shows that Peter Davison is a real fan because he's quite a big actor in England and has worked on quite a few series. And the fact that you can get him to do the audios shows that he's a pretty big fan because they're not really paying him much.
Oh
Show
yeah,
that he's a pretty big
and
fan.
not just do them, but give solid performances all the way. I mean,
Oh yeah.
he's not just coming in and doing it for a lark or whatever. I mean, some people even said that his performances on the audio ones are better than he was when he was on the TV show.
Yeah, he said that himself. He's actually said that when he first played Doctor Who, he was only about 30.
Right.
And he said only now sort of going up the Doctor. And I didn't appreciate him as when I was a student and I watched Doctor Who. I appreciate his performance now more than then because I'm better at judging acting now than then.
Yeah, except I think you're a little too harsh though.
But what he
You're
does
a little too
talk
quick to
about
call
though,
something bad acting when it's not really that bad.
or what he does talk about, one of the things he does on commentaries is Peter Davison does talk about his acting can become bad when he does the end of episode acting. And he talks about the end of episode where you have to get more dramatic.
Yeah. And I think over the course of Doctor Who, there were some kind of bad endings, but there were also a lot of really good ones. And I can think of ones where it was like the perfect because it wasn't like too over the top, and it was quick enough that it was like the cliffhanger really kind of hit you like by surprise. Even if it wasn't necessarily like a real dramatic action happening. Like there's some cliffhanger where a Cyberman bursts through the wall, or so there's this big dramatic thing that happens, even when there's not like a bunch of dialogue. But sometimes there can be something where it's just the anticipation of what's going to happen, like in the Ambassadors of Death, with the one cliffhanger where they have the space capsule, and the ending is just the Doctor says, "Right, cut it open," and that's the end of the episode. And there's another one with the Master. I think it was Claws of Axos, where basically he says, the master tells the brigadier, like, here, or it's this either one way or the other, and then he says, which is it to be, brigadier? And that's the end of the episode. So again, you end without the choice actually being made, but just the setup of it. So anyway,
yeah, and it's a good setup.
anyway, at some point in the future, we probably should do a Doctor Who video, since we talk about it in relation to everything else.
Yes.
but I guess
Well, I mean, because we are going to do all the homicides,
yeah.
so eventually we'll run out of Blade Sevens, and then what we could do is do some Red Dwarfs, and then because they're only like
we'll
28
see.
minutes.
I'm not gonna commit to that, but
Okay.
But anyway, I guess we should wrap up this one anyway.
Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. There's still...
I said wrap up. I didn't say in 2 seconds from now. So if you have something else to say, then say it.
Yeah. Then it is what it is. What do you think of Jenna Stannis?
I'd like to know what she whispered to Raker.
Well, yes, that's the thing, because they had to be quite subtle about the the rape thing and that kind of. They had to be quite subtle.
Well, she definitely benefits from being the only girl on board, in terms of, what they say about, like, guys that have to spend a long time in prison and haven't seen a woman in a long time.
Yeah, you'd think they'd look at her more. I mean,
she's pretty attractive, anyway, but obviously she
by any
stands out.
standards.
She stands out from the crowd of dudes. So my perspective, obviously, might be different than somebody watching who's attracted to dudes. So, I don't know.
That's right. And in later episodes, she wears more figure-hugging costumes.
Yeah.
And yeah, she looks pretty good.
Yeah. Comes off like probably ISTP type, at least so far. They kind of set her up to be, she's kind of trying to be the tough, I can stand up for myself. I'm not at all like intimidated by any of these people, and at least so far, it seems like it's pretty accurate. I mean, that it's not just, a facade she's putting up. Like, she doesn't seem to be, which makes sense. I mean, it's like, she's in prison for, like, smuggling stuff. She's obviously somebody who, has established herself as not a necessarily law-abiding citizen all the time, and somebody who's an opportunist in some way. So obviously, she's probably had plenty of tough people to deal with in her business and whatever her travels have been.
So she ticks the audacity box in the 3 A's.
Yeah, right. And she's image conscious enough that she doesn't have the, of course, some of this may be dictated by the network, but she, in terms of her looks, she obviously, it falls down on the side of, I can use the fact that I'm attractive in my favor, rather than kind of going to the extreme of, I'm not going to attempt to look good because I don't care about that. So, and that's kind of a divide, actually, I think, maybe with SP women, is that some of them have that full on, I'm going to be like a tomboy kind of, I just do what the guys do and I don't try to do this. But then you have some that, sort of discover the utilitarian way they can use, their feminine wiles, if you want to say that way. And so they, have sort of established that. And it's obvious that she's, that she's figured that out.
Yeah, and SPs are probably the most likely of the types to say, if you've got it, flaunt it.
Yeah. So if there's something, if there's a way you can use something, then, and so there's a little bit of maybe a built-in kind of layer of that. You figure probably the majority of the prisoners are likely to be SPs, because it just seems to be the case. and they tend to be more the opportunists, and then, so.
In Blade 7, it's like, it's either SP prisoners or like INTJs.
Yeah, so.
Masterminds, the criminal masterminds.
Yeah,
There
which
weren't.
yeah, it sort of makes sense. Yeah. And then probably most of the guards are going to be your SJs in the administration,
Yeah.
because SJs like to guard and administrate.
Yep. Were we on air when we talked about Riker and Jenna and the
The
sexual
Raker,
assault?
Raker.
Raker and Jenna, the the
Yes.
sexual assault subtext. We were on there during that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. So now the wind up will be mentioning things from this book on the episode Spacefall. So it was written by Terry Nation. All the episodes in season 1.